is March 15th, 2018, which means it is time for Schoology Leap. March here in the United States is Women's History Month, and so I have I am humbled and privileged to be joined by two of the most, that's my cat, most talented and brilliant women that I get to work with every day. So this is Sarah Viner and Kelly Adey. Thank you so much for being with us for Leap today.
Thanks for having us. Thanks for not pointing out that it's the Ides of March while you're working with us. That would have been much more ominous.
I was not going to mention it, but now that you put it into the universe, I suspect the internet to shudder and just close at any second. I wanted to point out before we get started that if you happen to hear anything, any messaging or any quotes that you really are inspired by or that you think are helpful, feel free to join us in the Twitterverse at #SchoologyLeap. We had some great tweets this morning, and we hope that people stay engaged. And before we get into the meat of today's program, we're going to start with some news and updates and talk a little bit about what's going on here at Schoology. So Sarah, if you'd like to jump in and share what's happening.
Yeah, some exciting new updates that hopefully everyone has already heard about because of our awesome new emails going out with our web releases. So you've probably already read this, but if you didn't have time to read through that email, just a quick overview of what's changing or has already changed, I should say, this month. Firstly, we've got some new gradebook options. So we heard everyone talking about some things they really wanted to be able to do within our gradebook, and so we made them happen. The first one is that you now have the ability to sort either by last name of your students in your gradebook or by their first name, and you can now sort either ascending or descending. So that's useful if you have a lot of students with the same last name. You might be looking for those first names instead. You also now have a word wrap option. So rather than just seeing a cutoff, something Jones, something Smith, you now actually see the whole name. So hopefully no more good excuses for giving students the wrong grades by accident. And then another thing that is really exciting that we've had a ton of feedback around is that we finally have been able to put in a preview of our assessment tool. So that exists both in our new feature, the assessment, that we've talked a lot about in the last few leaps last year, as well as in our managed assessments. So in the top right-hand corner of your assessment, you'll now see a new button that says preview. And when you click on that, you'll actually see what the student will see. So you get that whole feeling for the student experience, and you don't have to guess at what they'll actually see by previewing each question individually. It will still show you every question, one on each page, but that should give you a little bit more visibility into what they'll see. And then lastly, what we talked about last month is our awesome leap on digital citizenship. And we've been running a really cool campaign that people have been really revving up towards, all around digital citizenship and being a good citizen on the internet. And one awesome thing is that people have been pledging support as well as pledging solutions and implementing solutions within our campaign. So at schoology.com/digcit, D-I-G-C-I-T, and I'll post that link in a second. That's where our page, our landing page for all the digital citizenship information is. And so if you still have an idea around digital citizenship and some ways that you've been planning lessons or cool initiatives that you've been doing around DigCit, please do go on there and share those cool initiatives with us. We're sharing them not only with other teachers and staff members, but the idea is that it rolls into the students too, because not only would you as a teacher be implementing that solution, that would trickle down to your students as well by implementing that in your classrooms. So we've got a ton of students that it's affecting already, which is really exciting with that pledging of implementing a solution. You have exactly one more day to do it. So it is going to close tomorrow on Friday the 16th. So if you do have an idea, make sure you squeeze it in there before that campaign closes. That's all we've got for news and updates.
As we were talking, I got a text from my niece who is in elementary school. And I get about 1,000 of those every day. And I don't find them annoying at all. I'm really excited because my brother has set up a contact list, and my sister, her daughter as well. They've set up contact lists of the people that they're allowed to text so that they can get into the habit of how to text, what's appropriate, what time, and things like that. And in its own way, that's the beginnings of digital citizenship. And it's never too early to start, is the way I feel. And so when we start to talk about Schoology and LMSs, a lot of times, it started at the higher ed level, and now we do a lot of work at the high school, middle school level. But, we want to start encouraging people, seeing that trickle down into the elementary level. So Kelly, I'll pitch to you first. What are some challenges you think that people face getting LMSs and Schoology per se into the elementary level, and just a couple of tips to get them started?
Well, I think that, as you mentioned, for a long, the origin of the LMS started in higher ed, and then I think people naturally thought that it was a good fit for secondary students. But I think that, we've seen, especially with younger and younger kids using technology and getting into those learning spaces, that, they're really ready to do some of those things online that we can do. A barrier that used to be an issue was often devices. And that's now also getting mitigated, and we see more and more devices coming in, even if they're being used in stations or centers or with paired devices. We're seeing that at younger and younger ages. And I also think that for elementary teachers especially, a lot of what they do may not be involving the computer all the time. And there may be a perception that, I have to have students on the platform to really leverage something like Schoology. And there's a lot you can do as a teacher in terms of communication with parents, or tracking student progress against standards, even if they're not in the platform at that time. And then, as you mentioned, Mike, having a place to have kids safely learn how to interact in a discussion board, and do that even with recorded audio. They don't have to necessarily have the keyboarding skills that maybe people think that they have to really engage at younger and younger ages. So I think there's a lot of potential in elementary. And so I think this is a really good topic for us to have, because we get questions a lot about how do we use Schoology with kids that are, especially, in K2, and then also, of course, in 3-5, where we see a lot of great interactive dynamic content happening at those ages.
Sarah, you were in the classroom at the elementary level, or preschool as well. Can you speak a little bit towards, Kelly brought it up, the communication aspect? Communication with parents, that sort of teamwork with parents at the elementary level is vital, and where you see the benefits of an LMS, of Schoology, in bridging that gap of communication between parents and the teacher.
Yeah, I would say my experience in the classroom is sort of the opposite of a learning lesson. In that I didn't really use any digital technology in my classroom. So you would be trying to kind of grab parents when they had a chance, or parents would be trying to get your attention when you were in the middle of something, and it was just really hard to organize that communication factor. So what I've seen be really successful was not anything to do with my own classroom, but rather with the awesome schools that we've seen doing a really great job with Schoology. And what I see being really successful is not even a focus on actually creating all of those parent accounts, because sometimes that is out of teachers' hands. They are not planning this rollout. They're not the ones in charge of bringing parents in. And maybe parents don't really want to come into the platform already. That might be a longer rollout goal. But right from the get-go, the fact that parents can see what the students see is really exciting. So what we've seen in a lot of classrooms, it's kind of a unifying factor, is that teachers will create just a simple folder that's just parent communication. And that will have things like the forms that you would usually try and print out and give to the student, and especially at those younger years, it gets scrunched right up at the bottom of their backpack, never to be seen again. So having the ability to put those forms online for students to be able to re-access, or parents to be able to print out their own accord, things like a scope and sequence, things like a homework planner, content that is just a little harder to get students to convey to their parents, that parents also want to have the access to. But the fact that a student can log into their own Schoology account at home, and a parent can actually look over their shoulder and see what the student sees, they can even peek at their grades, they can peek at some of the content that's available for them and the discussions that are going on. That's really exciting, and that really opens up the channels of communication from teachers to parents from what I've seen.
So what we've done this month for you guys is we've gone out into the field a bit, and we've spoken to two teachers that we're going to hear from today, Teresa Vasquez and Jesse Bhutto. And we've just asked them a lot of questions revolving around how they've built their content out in their courses, what kind of experiences they've had with their students, and how their students have responded. So Sarah, go ahead, why don't you give a quick introduction to Teresa?
Yeah, Teresa is one of the most enthusiastic teachers I think I've ever had the pleasure of being able to work with. She teaches kindergarten at the Donald Leonetti Elementary School in Fort Bend, which is just outside of Houston, Texas. And she is really focusing on building out content in her classroom we had the opportunity to meet when we were working on the blended learning program with a group of teachers there, all specifically elementary, a whole cohort of elementary teachers that we were working with, which is incredible. The stuff that's going on already with that group is absolutely mind-blowing. And she, exactly as you said, Mike, she is doing some fantastic things, but she started small. So she talks a little bit about what you can expect to see from that initial baby steps in, dipping your toe in the water to see how it looks. And I will mention, so we also struggled through a ton of internet problems that they were having in her area in Fort Bend. We both were sharing our webcams, but for some weird reason, the webcams didn't pick up on the recording. So the first about 10 minutes we're talking, and you would have seen our webcams. I was even wearing a Schoology shirt. They didn't make the recording, so you just have to pretend like it's happening in your mind. But she does show us around her course, and so the screen that she shared with me will pop in about 10 minutes in, but at the beginning, don't worry that you're not seeing audio, you're just seeing stock photos of our faces, so sorry about that.
Right after that video, you'll see a brief interview I did with Jesse, and we talk a little bit more about some of the changes he's seen once he flipped his classroom. So let's get rolling.
Okay. Thank you, Leapers, for joining us for our recording here. I am here with Teresa Vasquez, who is one of our awesome contacts down in the Fort Bend School District. Teresa, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
My name is Teresa Vasquez. I am the kindergarten teacher for Donald Leonetti in Fort Bend.
And that's in Texas, Central Time.
In Texas, yeah, in Texas.
And we've had a chance to work together in a few different capacities. And every time we've been able to chat with you and hear about what you're doing in your classroom, it's been not only inspiring to us, but it's been the sort of stories and content that we share with other people too, to get them excited about using Schoology in elementary. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for giving us your time. All of the internet craziness and all the stuff we've been talking about, all out of the side, and now we actually are getting our show on the road to get some of your awesome expertise around using Schoology. So a really big question to start. You have been doing amazing things with your kindergarteners using Schoology, and you've been a real kind of early adopter and a front runner in doing a lot of those awesome activities with your students using the platform. So when we're thinking about this big question that we keep talking about with our kindergarten through third grade student engagement, really how you can build those really rich and engaging classroom experiences for students, how have you found that to be accessible in Schoology? And I'd love if you wanted to share a little bit about your course with us.
So I created my course to fit my classroom and what I've been familiar with, and using technology with kids, and then adapting the blended learning concept to fit my kids. I love to create graphics. I love to use images. I do teach kindergarten, so not all of them come in knowing how to read. They don't know how to identify certain things. So I use a lot of graphics. I use a lot of pictures, and because my love for creating them, I personalize them for myself, for my kids. And I believe that definitely helps, because my students automatically can get familiar with an icon that I've created and that I've showed them. And so that's how we navigate. That's how we first started to navigate through our Schoology course. And we started in September, October time last year. Just something simple, small group. I created for my students to be able to log on. I created a little template for them with each individual, all their information. And so they logged on that way. We use QR codes. So that's how we first started. It's taken us some time to just kind of be able to navigate. But I believe that the way we started was a great kind of introduction into Schoology for my kids, because immediately they were engaged. And I would use whole group. I would show them on the big screen, say, introduce you to something, guys, something really cool, exciting, and they would love it. And so I had introduced them to a fun Quizlet that I created. And so our first interaction with our small group was they actually, once they logged in, they got to immediately go to a Quizlet and do it all by themselves instead of in whole group. And they loved it. So I could record them or I could watch them, and they were just completely engaged. They're like, oh, I beat my score. And, I got 27 minutes, this being like 27 seconds or whatever. So it was really great. It was fun to watch. The kids enjoyed it. And so that was our first introduction. And so slowly but surely, I keep adding, and, I had a little more rigor to it, and I added a little bit more options for them. And at this point, from the beginning of the year to this point, we actually, a couple of weeks ago, we started our choice boards. And in kindergarten, I believe that this was a phenomenal kind of idea and concept. And what I noticed about my class was that they were quieter. I was like, "You guys having fun?" And they're like, "Yes." And I can't help but believe that it's with technology, but they adapted so quickly to it because it was their choice. They got to choose what they wanted to do. And immediately I gave them an incentive to, okay, well, if you post what you did today, then, I'm going to have some, Cubs Cash, what we do, or a reward for those of you who, are responding to our discussion. And it was, I don't even know what to say, because it was literally like I would have my, notification, so and so posted, so and so posted, so and so posted, and it would just, I would give them a 5-minute warning because they would get upset when we had to leave for out class and they hadn't posted yet. So I was like, okay guys, 5-minute warning, okay guys, 10-minute warning, and they were just excited about it. So yes, it's been a really great adventure for me and my class, and I'm looking forward to next year now that I have a little bit more information of how I want it to run, what I want it to do, and what works best for us.
And that's so key when you're thinking about, said slowly but surely, and this idea of, okay, this year I'm going to do what I can, and I'm going to start using the tools that are engaging and that work. And you immediately saw that a Quizlet was the first thing that would get them engaged. And maybe now you're doing something like a choice board, which is way more complex, and probably not the very first thing that you would do if you were starting to use the platform. So that gradual rollout, I would love to hear a little bit more about that. And you talked a little bit about that login process. What was, we were talking about that before. What was your kind of first experience with your kindergartners, knowing that, as you said, some of them don't even really have words and letters and keyboard recognition yet? What was that process of just getting them logged in and getting them familiar with that? How did that look?
So with my different guided reading groups, that's how I started it. I went with my higher group first, and I started with them. It literally took us about 25 minutes to log on. But once we logged on, our iPads, it would remember them. So it took us 25 seconds the next time around, and it just got easier and easier. So I did that with them first, kind of got them familiar with it. I got them interested and engaged and doing little things, discussions with me, or just logging on to look at a story or video that I created in my read box. And once they got really good at it, then I let them go and help a friend. So later on, they got to do it together. But eventually I had all my students come and all my students log on by themselves. And it was a little more difficult for, the students who didn't really have letter ID. They really couldn't, spell their name because they had to type it all out. And I helped them. But once we all logged in, they got to go to Quizlet. And like I said, they all loved it because it was something that they got to do with me on the big screen. And they wanted to take turns, and they were able to do it by themselves. So that was something they really enjoyed.
How do QR codes come into that?
So that's what we used first. So they had to scan the code that I created. And what I did is I linked my homeroom. And there's two different ways, because one way didn't work and there was another way. And I have to go back to double check which way worked the best, because if it takes us to Schoology and we log in, it gives us an error. But when we log in through Office 365, that's how it was able to work. Right. And so once we used the QR code, we would scan for my homeroom, and it would take us straight to Office 365. And then once the students logged in with their, student.forbin@, .com or whatever, and put in their password, then it would take them automatically to our homeroom. Awesome. And that was the first way that we started logging in. And eventually we just saved it to our homeroom, or to like our desk, or our screen, our home screen, or whatever. And we've been clicking on that. On occasion, it boots us out, so we've had to log on a couple of times. But it's a much easier process than it was in the beginning.
And then, so once they've gotten through that process and you've taught them that, and everyone's familiar with it, and your iPads have helped with that, with saving some of those names, when they're actually in your homeroom, and this might be a great point to share a little bit about your course. How do you get them engaged in the content that you actually put on your course? Because you were talking about it being visual and organizing each folder with groups. How did you encourage them to get excited about that? What did that look like?
Well, it's really interesting, because I had one student tell their mom, well, she had said, well, quacks, they get to go on Schoology all the time and bunnies don't. And I chuckled because, as we were learning, it was a little more difficult for my bunnies than it was for the quacks. And as soon as I was able to get them all on and really start having them, you know, logging on more, it was just, they are already, they wanted to do it. It was something they all wanted to be able to go and do, because my quacks were my higher group, is what I call them. And so I would meet with them, and then I would send them off to go and, you know, go back and reflect on a book that we had already read, or go back and, you know, read a story that was online. And they all the kids wanted to be able to do that. And again, I keep coming back to, maybe it's choice, maybe it's, you know, I can't pinpoint it yet, but whether it's choice or whether it's being able to kind of venture off and be on their own to learn, they all already wanted to do that. They were just something that I felt like they were excited about all on their own. So it didn't take much encouraging at that point, because they would see other kids like, well, what about us? We want to go. And so it kind of fueled themselves, you know, to be able to do that. And of course, I let them do, you know, go with partners. They could work by themselves, or they can partner, you know, because they would go off with their groups. So that explains it a little bit.
Awesome. And then, do you think you can share your screen with us so we can see a little bit about how that looks like within that folder structure? And you mentioned that you would organize your reading groups by those quacks and the peeps and the different groupings from your books. What does that actually look like?
And what it is so, and just before I want to let you guys know, before I log in, I have two different big icons on my homeroom, because everything's in my homeroom. And my first one, I call it my Lion's Den. And the Lion's Den is where we have all of our guided reading. We have, whenever we do small group, that's where everything is going to be housed. When I click on my Lion's Den, you'll see it. And then I also have my Schoology Den, and the Schoology Den is literally a link to every single one of my courses. But again, I use my icons instead of my kids having to go and click on the course and read it, because we're still learning how to read in kindergarten. But they're able to use the icons and the colors that we coordinate with our subjects to be able to access our Schoology. So I'm going to first show you my Lion's Den, and this is where we have all of our guided reading groups. Let me know if you can see. Yeah. Can you see okay?
Right, that's perfect, thank you.
So this is my homeroom, and so my students know that this is our Lion's Den, and this is where we go to access all of our workstation and guided reading groups. And then this here is my Schoology Den. So I'm going to click Lion's Den first. We've added a lot of stuff. This is our choice boards. This is what we've recently been doing, our read box, our library, and then Raz Kids and Epic. And this is all links to reading. So these are my quacks, and this is the first time when I first had the folder, this is the only thing I had. I had all my guided reading groups, and I basically use it, the peeps and the Big Wide World science videos, we love them. So, but if I click on my quacks, I have a few things here. The first thing, after doing our Quizlet, this is our Quizlet. So this is our Quizlet that we did. It was our first thing. It was a Quizlet ABC match. And so they got to hit start, and then they play the game here. And basically they just match, and then it gives them a time. They loved it. So let's see here. Go back out here. Sasha was the second thing that we did, and this is a story that I had wrote. It's like an ebook. And this was their first kind of interaction. They had to click on to read it, and it actually gives them directions. So I had put this together for them. And then it gives them a sentence stem. And I basically, all this here, I say in the audio here for the kids, so they're able to go. And then they just go ahead and they read it. They push play. And it's basically an ebook about my sister's dog that came to visit with me. And so it's the story through the eyes of Sasha, the boxer. And so these are all the characters that I created. They're actually, it's basically just pictures and then also the avatars. And so my students get to pick it. So in the beginning, we did Sasha November 8th. And it was, Brenda said Bobo was her favorite, Maybach is the kitty. And so eventually later on, if you notice from the 8th to the 9th, they started to type a little bit more. I like Sasha because she is the main character. So it's pretty fun to see kind of the progression of that. Let's see here, back to my quacks. This was another one that we did. I posted it, let's see here. I believe this one was, no, this was the 4th that we did, and this is a baby lion, and it's a story that my quacks had read, and it tells them basically, you know, what your favorite characters. This is during the time that we were talking about characters, and then so my students were able to post on 18th.
Amazing.
And then Ms. V went back to the repost. So I like Baby Lion, and you can tell like they didn't know how to space.
Yeah.
Baby Lion because he's brave, and then I like Father Lion. So, and this is just kind of a little bit of what we did here.
Amazing. And it looks like you didn't grade those yet. How do you go back? What's the next?
For me, grading will be, I guess, a little bit later. For right now, I just put it as a partition, like a participation grade for my students, just getting familiar with it, but it can definitely be something that I can use later on. I know that for Sasha, I had a quiz, if I'm not mistaken, that they were able to do. Again, I put directions, audio, and then I give them graphics. That's one question. And Sasha is the boxer that goes to Aunt Terry to visit Aunt Terry, and it just tells them, it reads it to them. And then this one here, they're able to put it in order.
Mm-hmm.
They had to put it in order, and they just move it around.
Right.
So simple. Mm-hmm. That's definitely something I want to utilize a little bit more next year. But it takes a little time for me to create.
That's definitely. And even just things like seeing that question where you have a scroll bar within that ordering question, that takes a lot of getting used to for little ones to say, oh, I've got a scroll bar for the whole Schoology page, but then also within it, there's a second one, and familiarizing with that is awesome. But as you say,
yes,
it's a lot of front loading. There's a lot of work that goes into this. And even, you haven't even shown us your most recent thing around choice boards, which is fantastic, but a lot of prep as well. So when we think about our elementary teachers who are a little bit, further down the road, at the beginning of the road, when we're thinking about how do we encourage them, and of course there's a lot of hesitation, there can be some sort of fear factor there around that. What have you found to be successful when you're working with your colleagues around encouraging them to get to a place where you are?
So what I remind them is that once I've created it, it does take a little bit of prep, but once I created it, it's already created and I don't have to do it again. I can share it with them, and we can share, we can just by a click of a button. And that's the part that I think they think about it and like, okay. So once they put a little bit of work into it, it's already done. So it's organizing for me that I'm trying to get everything that I've done and then just kind of put it somewhere where I can share with everybody, and then everybody. So once we get familiar with that a little bit more, maybe having a place to save it for, any kindergarten teacher within Schoology, and then them just being able to just click it and getting accustomed to that, as opposed to going to make copies or finding it in your files. You just click on a folder. And so that's something that I'm working on making happen, so that we're able to use those, because even in our exemplars we have different folders already, and in Schoology as a district, we have different things that they've already created that we can just click, and I add those to my folders. And it's just getting accustomed to adding things like that, knowing what's on there, what the content is, and then sharing it. But I believe that for me, it's going to be smarter, not harder, because once you're done with it, it's already created. And anybody that creates something that's engaging for their students, we'd be able to share, just house it somewhere for everybody to share, everybody to click on. And that for me gets me excited, because there's so many great ideas that I have, and I know there's a lot of great ideas out there. We just have to figure out how to share it all and make it more of an effort and time to take the time to share it.
Right.
I encourage them in a way that I share with them what I have, what I've done, what's possible. And I think that for us, there's a lot of things out there that we can go and search, but it's actually giving it to them, that it's like, this is what you need, this is what you do. Whenever I do my tutorials, I make like a screenshot of everything, like how to, so they see what I've done. And for me, I believe that helps to to encourage them, and instead of not knowing what to do or how to do it, they're able to see it, and then it makes it a little easier to take that adventure.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. I know when we shared that fantastic sway page that you made with some of our colleagues that were thinking about, how can we encourage our schools who have already started using it really heavily in middle and high school, but there's some fear around that elementary and having the little ones use it. And that sway page was super exciting. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you did there?
I can pull it up here.
365 School, this would be similar to a Google site as well. It's a really cool kind of website creation tool within 365, right?
Basically, it talks about how I started Schoology, what Schoology has meant to me, how I utilize it, and then logging in. I have here, and this is a video of them logging in. This is actually, so this is actually the Ms. V's homeroom that I created with their QR code. This is actually the first thing this is what we used. You see it here on the table. This is what we used to first log in. And so this was my students, and one of them said, "Oh, that took forever. It took so long." In the video, you can see it's great. And then after that, like I said, it took us about 25 minutes the first time, and then the second time was like 25 seconds. It was great.
And my sister does one more time, and she's in second grade.
I know you're gonna get to do it too.
Wait, Emma? No.
Put it down for me, Maddie Boo.
Yay! So that just kind of talks about us logging on with a QR code, and anybody, you can scan it, and it should take you to Schoology. If it'll take you to Office 365 first, and then it'll take you to your Schoology. So this is how I organized a way to allow my students to know which iPad to use, which they were already logged onto, because it took a long time, but we wanted to make sure we just got back to the one that was already saved. And so students know that wherever they go, this is the iPad they used. And the other day during choice boards, we had to go back and revisit where you're supposed to be and whose iPad which iPad to use, because then it all got mixed up. And so that was the learning lesson for all of us. Yeah. So, as a kindergartners, they were able to figure out, oh, okay, well, so if someone has my iPad, I can't use the other ones, and they have to partner up with someone else. Let's see here. And so this was my Quacks logging on for the first time. There's a lot of excitement there, which is a lot of fun. And then this is actually the Quizlet that originally, I think the one I showed you before was my copy, but this is the Quizlet. Again, it tells them what to do. I use the graphics and the pictures to kind of share with them where they're supposed to go. And this is actually just a screenshot. And then this is another one that they actually play.
Right.
So let's see here. This was another one that we did for just getting familiar with letter ID. This is them playing their Quizlet. They were very excited. And then this just talks about my homeroom here. Again, what I showed you, the Lion's Den, and then my Quacks folder. And this is initially how it was. Just this was the only thing we had in there in the beginning, and then gradually I just keep adding stuff. Choice boards is something that you guys taught us a while back. And so my students know that they get their iPad with whom they share with, and they also are able to have different partners, but they get to pick what they would like to do. This is pretty much our workstations. These are the same icons that I've used when I assigned it to them. And so students are able to pick 3 in a row or 3 down. But the really cool thing about our choice boards is my students can, and you should be able to see it, my students can click the icon, and then it tells them what they're supposed to do in case they forget.
Amazing.
And that's a lot of fun for me and for them because it helps them to know where to go. But then also what I love about this is that it also holds them accountable. So this is their daily discussion post, and it's basically all of their choices for this time around, and I'll be switching them out over the spring break. But so they get to post. I did go to RAS Kids today with Dianara, and so my students will just, they'll post. And so we started February 27th. And today I went to art and sock puppet Ms. B, but they're typing up and they're writing. And I tell them, use your resources here. And so it's a big string. I've got 62 posts of my students and myself. I try to go back. I went back once or twice to just encourage them. Good job, guys. Super.
That's a cool way to interact with them afterwards too, and hold them accountable, as you say. That's fantastic.
Yes, and I remind them that if you've already posted, if you already went to art, you don't go there again. And so we're still learning where they can go and not going to the same place over and over. But like I said, I noticed that even in my classroom, that it was just, they were so engaged, and you could tell that they were enjoying themselves. And it's the same workstations they've been doing since the beginning of the year, just different elements added to it. And then with Schoology, and they really have enjoyed it a lot.
So cool. I love that. Thank you for showing us that. That's such an exciting tool that they used. And I love that something that we covered in our blended learning program, put right into action in your classroom. That's so exciting.
I did, like the next day.
Clearly they enjoyed it. Those 10 minutes of quiet probably completely paid off for the half hour you created it.
It took a little longer than that, but you know what? I don't ever have to create it again. It's already done, and I just save it to resources, and they're ready for next year. So it's perfect.
I love it.
Dr. Gentune from I took a GT training, and this is something that kind of really it sparked something in me that I thought, wow, I really need to step up my game. And I was nominated, and I actually won Digital Innovator of the Year for elementary in my district. And that said a lot about what I've done, but I also felt like I didn't share enough. And I really wanted to be able to share what I do. And I am the technology champion for my school. And it's important for me to kind of train myself and get familiar with it, and then to be able to share it. And so I think that this time around I maybe have done a little bit more, and I can figure out a little bit this summer of what else I want to do, but I definitely feel like I want to share.
Way to share with the other people, especially if sharing is a big goal for you, being able to not only start from where you are and gradually and slowly and steadily build more and more capacity in your own classroom and in your own skill set and hone that craft. Then sharing it out like this on a sway page is fantastic, or being able to share them using the resources that you have in Schoology, giving other teachers those ideas. And then as they become inspired, you can really harness that collective power that they have too, and all of that intellectual property that you're able to share with one another, so that you're not each reinventing the wheel. You're really becoming a sort of group thinking tool to them as well as they are to you.
Yes.
That's fantastic. Teresa, thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. This is so cool and so exciting. We'll share out the Sway page so that people can take a look at that too on their own time, because there's some fantastic content on there. But thank you so much for providing us with all these fantastic ideas and your enthusiasm around it. This is a really cool place to start. One day you can be like Teresa.
My name is Jesse Bhutto. I teach at Randolph Heights Elementary in St. Paul, Minnesota. I've been a teacher for 13 years. I teach a 4-5 combined class, so a split grade class. I've been using Schoology now for really 2 years solidly. This is my second year using Schoology. I have been named a Minnesota CBS Digital Innovator for 2016 and an Apple Distinguished Educator in 2017. So this work that I've been doing has really been important, and Schoology has been a big piece of that for this last year in moving my class forward in a digital way. So I had in my head for a while the idea of trying to turn the math curriculum over to my students and figure out a way. Our district has broken all the standards into specific learning targets. We have specific learning targets, and then we have assessments for each of those learning targets. And I've been playing with the idea of how can I get my students to independently kind of choose where they want to go, and say, I'm going to study this geometric learning target. I'm going to become a master at it, and then I'm going to take an assessment on it. So how can I create content that the students can work on by themselves, and then how do I get that assessment to them in an easy way? So I jumped in and I started putting everything in Schoology. I started to use Schoology sort of as the backbone of my math time.
Mhm.
So Schoology was the place where the kids would go. They would everything would be organized for them. They would be able to find it easily, work on it easily. It may take them to other places, but we always return to Schoology as sort of the home base, the home space.
Like a central hub.
Exactly. I really look at it as like the skeleton of what I do. Other things, maybe the muscle, maybe the thing that they actually are working in, but
Mhm.
that skeleton, that piece that holds everything together is what Schoology does for me. I sort of abandoned the idea of that complete voice and choice and letting them choose whatever they wanted to do, and instead it became a self-paced scope and sequence. So there's a prescribed sequence of the units, but the kids are able to go through it at any pace that they want. So I've got students who go really quickly through units, and I've got kids who need a little bit more time and work much more slowly, and they can work at their pace. And so what that's freed me up to do is give my those kids who kind of get it, or it comes to them easily, it gives them something to do, something to work on. And it frees me up then to work with those students who are struggling and really devote my time to working with those students. So I've got 4th grade units, 5th grade units. I've got some 6th grade units for at the end of the year once we pass our tests, or for kids who have moved on really fast and finished all of 5th grade. I've got a few 6th grade standards as well. If we go into one of them, you'll see that they're broken down. I broke them down by unit. And this is different than the way our district has broken them down. But I instead took them and broke them down in unit that corresponds with the learning target for the state standard. So within a unit, I try to organize it into consistent pieces. I always start with an overview. So a page that just sort of describes what it is I'm looking for. There may be some instruction in here. I try to keep it text light because I know my students tend not to read the text when it's in front of them. In fact, sometimes I'll put little Easter eggs into my text and say at the end of a paragraph, I'll say, if you read this paragraph, come find me and I'll give you something. And I usually get 1 or 2 students per time who actually come and say, oh, I read that sentence. So knowing that, I try to keep it image heavy, and I try to use videos whenever possible because that's really a good way for me to explain. So in this one, I just have some pictures and saying, do you see the triangles in this picture? Oh wait, how now do you see the triangles in this picture? And then at the bottom, I always include what are the criteria that I'm looking for in this unit. I'm asking you to draw shapes, and I'm in this Schoology assignment, and then I'm asking you to create an artifact, that is, create a book that shows triangles both in the real world and on paper.
So it does sound like you've really embraced that transition from direct instruction to facilitation and coach.
Yep. I have not taught a whole group lesson in front of the class in 1.5 years. Well, I guess now 1 3/4 years. And instead, I'm doing small groups, I'm doing individual work, I'm moving around the classroom, assisting kids wherever they're at. And it's an amazing transition. It feels right. It feels really good. I feel much more involved in where they are on a daily basis, and because I know where they are and I know what they're understanding and not understanding.
Have you noticed a shift in seeing students feeling more empowered as they've taken sort of a more hands-on role in their education compared to when it was more direct instruction?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Much more empowered. I mean, even just the idea that when they get stuck or they see that red dot over and over and over again, they come and find me. Whereas before they'd try to hide it, or they wouldn't care, or they just do it and not know. Now they know I'm getting it wrong. I need to go find Mr. Bhutto. I need to go get some help. This is my responsibility. What I have done, though, is tried to train my parents as much as possible to sort of check their child's progress in Schoology. I said the grades are up there. They will be up there for you to look at so that you can see if kids are making due dates, are they're done or not done. What are some
starting points? What are some things you can do to get started right away utilizing an LMS or utilizing Schoology at this level?
It's got to be a small start. I'm going to pop this link into Schoology, and there you go, guys, and you're just going to go straight there. So something even as simple as that, the huge time saver and the huge hassle saver of pointing kids in a direction on a website is really amazing. Handing kids a PDF is really simple. Pop it into Schoology, say open it up, put it in Notability or some other, some other thing that works the same way, and you've got it. And from there, it's about starting to build small units. I'd say, start with one unit that you want to build and put the instructions in the Schoology. So start with just an assignment. Here, do this, take a picture of it, upload it back into the assignment. Just moving yourself slowly. The more you do, the more it really takes over. I started with math, and I've spent the last year and a half or more working almost nonstop on building these math units. It's been an incredible amount of work. But now that most of them are built and up and running, I don't have to do that again.
Right. Well, Jesse, I'm so thankful for your time today. I think that's one of the things I take away from is seeing, your students creating.
The thing that I try to do in my classroom is creation over consumption. It's not enough to have passive screen time. It's not enough for them to just be consuming media and consuming. If they're not creating, then they're not using the tools for what they're there for. We need to be teaching our kids to create. We need to be teaching them to use this media and these tools for the power that they are. And it's that creation that is going to create the learning and really seal that stuff in. I can give them a lot of problems to just do over and over and over again, but it's not until they have to explain it back to me, until they have to create something that shows that they really understand it, that it really sinks in and becomes real. So creation is the key.
I hope you read this book.
So we are back, and I hope that everyone enjoyed those two user stories. Kelly, you hadn't had a chance to see those. Any takeaways from those two chats?
Well, you mentioned earlier the importance of starting with something small. And I think that, both in kindergarten to fifth grade, there's, obviously a big range of grades in between, but really it's the same idea of starting with something that is really going to be helpful, either for like ease of, access, productivity, like Jesse said, just throw in a link at first, maybe throw in some directions and then let it build from there. But I also, loved how they talked about, yes, there's some front end work that has to happen to get that to work smoothly. But then once it's really built, you can reuse that content over and over again and update it. So I also loved how they were so student centered in how they were approaching what they did. So, the choice boards that we saw from Teresa, and then, that whole idea of students, if for Jesse, I liked his point about not letting them just choose anything, but structuring their learning, but they can choose, when they do it and at what time, and in some cases how they show that knowledge. So.
Yeah, and I think another takeaway you heard them both talk about is the importance of being organized, like that pre-work we talked about, an organized plan, having a strategy, and then the piece that they are trailblazers, so they didn't really have, but maybe can become for others, is that personalized support and help and consultation. So just so happens when we talk about strategy, organized plan, and consultation, we here at Schoology have a new thing we're calling the Elementary Kickstart. And I thought, Kelly, maybe you could take a minute and talk about that.
Sure. We get a lot of questions at Schoology about, scaling, into lower grades. And, you may have a lot of folks that are using it at, maybe your middle school or high school. But for folks that really want to look at vertical alignment, how do we get started? So Schoology is putting together what they're calling the Elementary Kickstart. And what it is basically kind of a roadmap for how you can start to use Schoology with elementary students and in different phases. So starting with something small, thinking through what your strategy is that you really want to achieve with kids, and then even looking through a year or where you should be 2 years down the road. So we've got a dedicated webpage for this on our site. You'll see the link there at schoology.com/elementary. And when you get to that site, you'll see there's an area where you can sign up. And if you click on that and you submit your information there, it'll go directly to our client success team. And then they set up a consultation with you to talk about how Schoology could be used with the elementary school students and teachers in your district. So, and I also think that, one of the great things about Schoology is the community that we have, and we just saw two fantastic examples of that today. And I think we're going to see even more people sharing some of those group resources they're creating for students at those grade levels.
So I think then this would be a great time to bring LEAP to a close. I'd like to thank you both for joining me. We're all beaming in from different parts of the world right now. Well, that made it sound a little more glamorous than it is. Regardless, it's been a pleasure. And I look forward to seeing you guys for our first spring leap coming up 1 month from now. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday, everyone.
Bye, everyone.